Hi there again. So we just have a couple more questions. Go ahead, Jenny. Ask your question.
My question is, what's the difference between recognition of presence and awakening? And are there different stages to awakening, or is it just a never-ending process?
Okay. So, recognition of presence and awakening, they may be one and the same, but not necessarily, right? So, you know, when we recognize presence, when we have this very first time of experience of presence, right? That is not necessarily something that your attention remains resting in. Right? So it's like presence still, even though it is a recognition of presence, it still is like as if it was an object outside of you, right? An object that we go to and then come back from, so to speak. That's our experience, right? This is our attention. I remember, I don't know if you remember the first time or how it used to be for you. I remember, for me before awakening, it was still like as if there was a glass, between, like I could see it, it's here, but it's not me, right? It's still something that I can see, right? And I say, recognition of presence and awakening may be one and the same because it may happen for somebody like that, and they may awaken in that recognition of presence, right? But more often, recognition of presence is the beginning of the process that leads to awakening. Right? So recognition of presence, and that lasts for a second, for a minute, for a day, however long, and then attention moves away from that, and it still is perceived like as an object. Therefore, we say, well, it disappeared, right? Attention has moved, and we say, well, it's not here anymore, right? Until eventually, again, our attention comes to rest in it, and we say, oh, here it is again, right? And then we say it disappeared. So it's still, I was just talking with somebody not long ago, and they said, well, initially it was like they were recognizing presence, but it was outside of them, right? It's outside. It's an object, right? And that process can take however long it takes. We don't know, because most likely that has started for many of us many lifetimes ago. I can't really take any responsibility for the powerful experiences of presence that I had in this life before meeting Papaji. They would just happen, right? And so that was a result of some previous practices or previous, the desire for freedom, right? So, but then it will last for a certain period of time, and then it would, so to speak, disappear, right? So that's the recognition of presence, and that may go on however long it does. We don't know that, right? Until at some point there is the recognition that that's who you are. So there isn't anymore an object and subject. There isn't anymore anybody experiencing presence. There isn't anymore any coming and going. There isn't anymore any looking at it and then not looking at it. It's just who you are, right? It's your true nature. So as before, we would point towards our body and say, that's me, Now, when I sit here, if I just bring my attention here, or if I close my eyes for a moment, or just bring my attention here, what is here is spaciousness, right? It's not a thing, it's not a person, right? So that ground has shifted, right? And that awakening, that happens in a moment, you see. It's not a process. Process is what happens before. Recognizing presence, not recognizing presence. Recognizing presence, and then, whoa, where is it? And then coming, you know what I mean? And that goes back and forth until we are ready. There's the readiness, there's enough trust to just at some point, oh yeah, here it is. It's that recognition, here it is, and that's it. And that recognition can happen in a very simple way, in a very dramatic way, and anything in between, right? But that doesn't leave, any question anymore of what is presence or where is presence, or right? And that's what I call awakening. Right? Does that, you think, answer your question, or do you have more?
Yeah, that helps a lot.
And then, there's the recognition of presence, and that permeates through everything, right? And now it's like, can that recognition of presence really permeate through everything? Really, right? So can it be recognized in the midst of any experience? Right? Can that be seen in the midst of everything? Right? That's what I mean when I say awakening doesn't necessarily mean the end of conditioning. And that's what I also call freedom, right? Because now it's like that recognition, is it really alive in the midst of anything, anywhere, right? Is that ground of presence recognized in the midst of everything? Right? When past arises, is that recognized too? Right? So, what do you say? Do you?
Does that I hear people talking about the absolute, and I don't, I have.
Well, because there's a lot of different terminology, and I used to use that terminology a little bit more, and not so much recently, because recently in the last several years, not like yesterday, but because there can be some confusion about it. But the absolute means that from which everything arises, the ground of everything, right? So that we can say presence, right? We can say our natural state, the absolute. The absolute. And then, as opposed to the absolute, then we have the relative, which is our body, mind, and the world experience, right? And so we can say the relative arises in presence, right? It arises in the absolute. But there is sometimes confusion that, realization is about the absolute. Yes, to realize who we are momentarily, we have to let go of everything. We can't really hold on to any idea, even to this idea that we are this body. We can't hold on to that. If you hold on to that, you can't. In my own, process that led to awakening, there were several times that this process would start of everything disappearing, everything that I can see disappearing, and it would stop at some point, because there was still the identification with the body, and there was not enough trust to let go of that, you see. So to really realize who we are, even for a moment, we have to let go of everything, including the idea that we are this body, right? So we have to do that. That has to happen, let's put it this way. But then some people believe, well, once you realize, that's it, and that's where you stay in this absolute. And that's not true, right? Because you realize so that you can come back into the relative, right? Come back to the relative and function in the relative as presence, though. Function in a relative from presence, rather than function in a relative from the idea that I'm this body or this person, right? And so, like if somebody insists on just staying in the absolute, that's halfway true, right? That's not done, you know what I mean? Because there's still, and I have met people like that before, who just have realized, and then they hold on with everything they have to that realization, like, don't engage in the world, don't do anything, just be in the absolute. And it's like, absolute is everything, you see. Absolute is the emptiness, and absolute is the fullness. It's both. It's all of it. Absolute is nothing is here, and absolute, I'm everything. It's all of that, you see. So if there is any insistence on anything, like even on the absolute, that's suffering, you see, because that's kind of creating a limit that really isn't true, right? It isn't real, you know what I mean? That's still having to hold something, like Papaji's directions were very clear. Somebody after awakening said how to take care of this Papaji, and Papaji said, don't land anywhere. Right? Don't let the mind settle on anything that this is it. You know what I mean? There is no it. You know what I mean? Like if the mind says, oops, this is it, let's stay here, that's the end of it, you see? Because now we have believed something again, right? So like this, you know what I mean? Very permeable and very real in terms of, well, if we are in the, duality or the relative, so to speak, that's where it is. And if we are in the absolute, that's where it is, right? And so it goes, right, between those two. So.
Yeah, thank you. That's very good explanation.